안녕하십니까. 조선일보 경제부의 박사기자 박연철입니다. 오늘 박연철 박사의 머니머니에서는 특별한 시간을 마련했는데요. 하워드막스 오크트리캐피털 회장님의 인터뷰를 준비해봤습니다. 인터뷰를 진행한 조선일보 경제부의 김신영 금융팀장님 모셨습니다. 안녕하세요.
네, 안녕하십니까. 조선일보 경제부의 김신영입니다.
네. 하워드막스 그럼 상당히 유명하신 분이잖아요. 월가의 전설적인 가치 투자자 이렇게 불리는데 또 모르시는 분들도 있을 수 있으니까 일단 하워드막스 회장님 어떤 분인지 좀 설명을 좀 해주시죠.
네, 하워드막스 회장님은 이제 월가에서는 투자 구루로 통하시는 분입니다.
네.
연세는 이제 76살이시니까 젊진 않으시지만
워런 버핏보다는 좀 젊네요.
워렌 버핏보다는 훨씬 동생이시죠. 워렌
음.
버핏이 90살 넘으셨으니까.
네.
그 1995년에 오크트리캐피털이라는
네.
이제 자산운용사라고 해야 될까요?
네.
네, 자산운용사를 설립하셨고 지난 3월 말 기준으로 이 회사가 굴리는 돈이 얼마인지 보니까 1,640억 달러.
이게 어느 정도 되는데요?
이게
우리나라 돈으로 어느 정도 되는 거죠?
210조
예.
원인데요. 210조 원 하면 저도 감이 잘 안 오는데 그 한국의 한 해 우리나라 정부가 쓰는 예산 전체가 600조 정도 되거든요. 그것의 한 3분의 1 정도를 한 회사에서 굴리니까
엄청난 돈을
어마어마하게
지금 굴리시는
큰
분이네요.
돈인 것은 확실합니다.
예. 이분이 또 특이한 게 이분 메모를 계속 쓰시잖아요.
네,
이게 좀
네.
특이하다고 그러던데요.
네, 이분이 이제 메모라고 하는데 그게 뭐 이렇게 작은 메모는 아니고요.
네.
말하자면 이제 일종의 어떤 시장이나 이 경제에 대한 에세이를 그때그때 쓰신다고 보시면 돼요. 이게 한 10쪽 정도? 아니면 좀 길 때도 있고 그 정도
네.
되는 이제 글인데 그 메모가 엄청나게 통찰력이 있다고 알려져서 그 워렌 버핏이 이런 말을 한 적이 있어요. 내 메일함에 하워드막스의 메모가 있으면 나는 그것부터 열어본다. 이런 말이 있을 정도로 투자자들에게는 굉장히 영향력을 많이 미치는 그런 메모를 쓰는 분으로 유명합니다. 글을
예.
굉장히 잘 쓰신다고 해요.
예, 그럼 인터뷰를 한번 들어보도록 하죠.
In your past books and memos, you emphasize the cycle many times, but investors don't seem to realize what they are what they are going through. So, what stage of this cycle do you think the current situation is at, and why?
Well, first of all, you're right. The investors never know what stage they're in, because if they knew, they would act differently. When the bull market becomes overheated and the investors think it's going to go on forever, well, if they knew that it was the peak of the bull market, then they would not be as optimistic, and they would apply some caution. Now, this is a very atypical cycle, if it's a cycle at all. As you know from reading the book. Most cycles have the result of excessive optimism, which produces excessively aggressive behavior, which then eventually corrects.
Right.
The cycle we went through in the last 2 years was not the explanation. We had a pandemic, so it was not endemic from the inside. It wasn't endemic to the markets or the economy. It came from outside, from the disease. And then, of course, the recovery was not a normal cyclical recovery. It was produced by the Fed and the Treasury and the other central banks. So it's very hard to discuss the last 2 years in normal cyclical terms. However, now we are returning to more normal economic times, which means that the economy has been growing. Unfortunately, I would say overstimulus by the Fed and central banks has brought on inflation, in addition to excess demand and inadequate supply. So now we have the inflation, which the Fed wants to correct by raising interest rates and withdrawing monetary stimulus. So right now we are somewhere in a decline. We're not up here where nobody thinks there's going to be a decline, and we're not down here where everybody thinks it's going to go on forever. We're somewhere in the middle. Remember, the middle stage of the bear market it says people accept that deterioration is actually taking place. Well,
see,
that is certainly true, and securities asset prices, stock prices have corrected. They're down substantially. If the economy gets much worse, and if inflation is stubborn and resists interest rate increases, meaning interest rates have to be increased a great deal more, of course, the market could go down more. When you're in the middle territory, it's hard to be confident that it's either going to go up or that it's going to go down. And that's where we are.
Hey, seems like very difficult time for.
Well, I've been working something out in my mind lately, and I'm going to tell it to you and see if you get it. But there are two times. There's the time when we don't know what's happening, and there's the time when we think we know what's happening and we're wrong. It's always confusing. It's just that sometimes we're not aware of the confusion.
Like in your memo, let's go back to your memo. And you mentioned the past bull market starting in early 2020, skipped the first and second stage and went straight to the third stage, which is kind of, to the moon stage, I guess. Everybody said we are going to the moon. So do you think like the bull market was different? Do you think will the process of ending the bull market be different this time?
Well, it could be because we have an unusual high level of involvement on the part of the central banks, and many recessions take place because business weakens. In this case, the Fed is taking actions which have a very good chance of producing a recession. So that's a little different. But as you know, one of the things I stress is that these things are not mechanical relationships, and they're not dependable. So the Fed actions could produce a recession. Some people say a serious one. The Fed is trying to produce what's called a soft landing, cool off the economy, but not enough to produce a recession. I think very hard to do. Most people think that's improbable. The Fed has tried, and the other central banks have tried many times in the past without success. So, chances are interest rates will go higher. That will slow the economy. We'll probably have a recession sometime in the next 12 to 24 months. Some people think we're in one already. You never know. And then probably at some point, once the Fed gets inflation under control, the recovery will probably resume. Recovery of the economy.
Okay. And I read your recent interview with Financial Times. It was really fun to read. And the title was very provocative, I guess. The title was
the title? I don't know if I ever noticed it.
Time is ripe to snap up bargains.
The point is this, that 2 years ago, everybody was optimistic. The Fed was pushing the market up, and people were excited about recovery. And of course, the market did well for the next year or so after the summer of 20. Today, the economy has slowed down. The Fed has withdrawn its support, and a lot of things have declined very substantially. Now, I don't believe that we can say, oh, that's cheap, that's not cheap, with certainty. All we can say for sure is that it's a lot cheaper than it used to be, is that this is a reasonable time to do some buying. Yeah, I mean, the last thing I would say is that this is the bottom. It's not going to go down anymore. You have to spend all your money here. But I also don't think that it would be appropriate to spend no money here. I think investors should spend some of their money here. And we've been rather cautious, except for, March, April, May of 20. We've been pretty cautious. And now I would say we're less cautious, because if you think about your readers, they go to the department stores when there's a sale.
Mm.
Well, all I know for sure is that the prices have been reduced. There's a sale going on. We say in the United States there could be further markdowns during the sales. Well, there could be further
Yeah.
markdowns in the market too. But
Mm.
but you know, the important thing in that article was that the idea of saying we're not going to buy anything until we get to the bottom.
Mm.
That's a terrible idea because you never know when you're at the bottom. And the bottom comes about because everybody achieves maximum pessimism. And at that time, very few people are capable of buying.
No, I
So
see.
so what I believe is you buy a little here, if it gets cheaper, you buy a little more.
In a memo published in January last year, I really enjoyed reading it. It
you.
included conversation with your son, Andrew. And
Thank you.
the time was very different from now, but you mentioned in the memo that value and growth stocks have somewhat, the definition of value and growth stocks somewhat have changed. And you concluded that the two are not mutually exclusive concepts. So do you still hold the view? Because now, so-called growth stocks are doing really, it's coming down faster than value stocks.
Yeah, but they had gone up the most, so they went down. Now they've gone down the most. That memo was not about which group you should buy or which one was likely to perform better. What that memo was about was really open-mindedness. And, people who consider themselves value investors, they developed it in like a hard fashion, like a religion. And they said, well, I'm a value investor. I can't buy a technology stock. And what the memo was about was that that a tech stock can be a value and a cheap stock can be no value, a low price stock, and that you should look beyond labels to fundamentals. If you look at, as you'll recall from that memo, I said, well, how does S&P define a value stock? And the answer is low ratio of price to book, low ratio of price to sales, low ratio of price to earnings. In other words, cheap.
Mhm.
But the fact that something's cheap doesn't mean it's necessarily good value if it has a bad future. The fact that something has high valuations doesn't mean that it's bad value if it has a great future. So it was really saying that the definitions were too strict, and that people should be more open-minded, and in particular, the value investor, there should be some. It shouldn't be impossible for a value investor to invest in a technology stock. That was most of it.
I see.
There was a lot more, of course, and that memo had more response than any other memo in history. In my
really?
history. Yes.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, you should know that about 2 weeks ago, Oaktree put out a podcast of Andrew and me in
really?
discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, so you might enjoy that.
Sounds interesting.
자, 1부에서는 투자 사이클에 대한 하워드막스 오크트리캐피털 회장의 얘기를 들어봤습니다. 2부에서는 테크 버블에 대한 견해를 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 2부는 다음 시간에 준비를 했습니다. 그럼 다음 시간에 또 뵙도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.